Chapter 1. I was born in the year 1632 in the city of York of a good family, though not of that country. Being the third son of the family, and not bred to any trade, my head began to be filled very early with rambling thoughts. My father, who was very ancient, had given me a component share of learning. As far as house education and country free school generally go, and designed me for the law. But I would be satisfied with nothing but going to sea. And my inclination to this led me so strongly against the will, nay, the commands, of my father, and against all the entreaties and persuasions of my mother and other friends, that there seemed to be something fatal in that propension of nature, tending directly to the life of misery which was to befall me. My father was a wise and grave man, gave me serious and excellent counsel again, what he foresaw was my design. After this he pressed me earnestly in the most affectionate manner not to plan the young man, or to precipitate myself into miseries, which nature, and the station of life I was born in, seemed to have provided against, that I was under no necessity of seeking my bread, that he would do well for me, and endeavor to enter me fairly into the station of life which he had been just recommending to me, and that, if I was not very easy and happy in the world, it would be my mere fate, or fault, that I must hinder it, and that he should have nothing to answer for, having thus discharged his duty in warning me against the measures which he knew would be to my hurt. In a word, that is, he would do very kind things for me, if I would stay and settle at home as he directed. So he would not have so much hand in my misfortunes as to give me my encouragement to go away. And, to close all, he told me, I had my elder brother for my example, to whom he had used the same earnest persuasions to keep him from going into the Low Country wars, but could not prevail, his young desires prompting him to run into the army where he was killed. And though he said he would not cease to pray for me, yet he could venture to say to me that if I did take this foolish step, God would not bless me, and I would have leisure hereafter to reflect upon having neglected his counsel when there might have been none to assess my recovery. I observed, in the last part of his discourse, which was truly prophetic, though I suppose my father did not know it to be himself, I observed the tears run down his face very plentifully, and especially when he spoke of my brother who was killed, and that when he spoke of my having leisure to repent, and none to assist me, he was so moved that he broke off the discourse, and told me his heart was so full that he could say no more to me. I was sincerely affected with this discourse, as indeed who could be otherwise? And I resolved not to think of going abroad any more, but to settle at home according to my father's desire. But, alas! A few days wore it all off, and, in short, to prevent any of my father's future importunities, in a few weeks after, I resolved to run quite away from him. It was not till almost a year after this that I broke loose, though in the meantime I considered obstinately deaf to all proposals of settling my business, and frequently expostulating with my father and mother about their being so positively determined against what they knew about my inclinations prompted to me. But being one day at Hull, whither I casually, and without any purpose of making an elopement at that time, but, being there, and one of my companions going by sea to London, in his father's ship, and prompting me to go with him, with the common allurement of a seafaring man, that it should cost me nothing for my passage, I consulted neither father nor mother any more, nor so much as sent them word of it, but leaving them to hear of it as they might, without asking God's blessing on my father's, without any consideration of circumstances or consequences, and, in an ill hour, God knows, on the 1st of September, 1651, I went on board a ship bound for London. Never any young adventurer's misfortunes, I believe, began sooner or continued longer than mine. The ship was no sooner got out of the Humber, but the wind began to blow and the sea rise in the most frightful manner. And I had never been at sea before. I was most inexpressibly sick in my body, and terrified in my mind. I began now seriously to reflect upon what I had done, and how justly I was overtaken by the judgment of heaven for my wicked leaving my father's house and abandoning my duty. These wise and sober thoughts continued all the while the storm continued, and indeed some time after, but the next day the wind was abated, and the sea calmer, and I began to be a little inured to it. However, I was very grave for all that day, being a little seasick still. But towards night the weather cleared up. The wind was quite over, and a charming fine evening followed. The sun went down perfectly clear, and rose so the next morning. And having little or no wind, and a smooth sea, the sun shining upon it, the sight was, as I thought, the most delightful that I had ever saw. I had slept well that night,